Hi, everyone. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ron.
And we are from the Hacker Valley Studio podcast. And it is our honor to welcome you to the third annual Purple Hats Conference. A three-peat for us as your MC.
And as we say on the podcast, glad to be back again. We can't get enough of the Purple Hats Conference because it has so much cybersecurity goodness every year, especially when we put our feet up and soak it all in virtually from home.
And a few things to keep in mind for today's event. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So don't be shy, jump in, ask questions, communicate with your fellow attendees. Could be some great friends out there that you could make. We'll also have a short survey after each session, along with some pop-up surprises along the way. So definitely stay engaged and participate.
That's right. And we have another way you can support a good cause. In honor of World Health Day tomorrow, we're supporting a few great organizations you can see on the screen right now. If you're inspired to join us, head over to purplehats.org and click on Give Back to donate directly.
We've got thousands. That's right, thousands of cybersecurity practitioners tuned in today. So let's not keep everyone waiting. We're diving right into our opening address from AttackIQ CEO Brett Galloway, followed by our keynote, Evolution of Cybersecurity with Greg Lavender from the Intel Corporation. We'll see you on the flip side.
Hi, I'm Brett Galloway, the CEO of AttackIQ, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the third annual Purple Hats Conference. It feels like just yesterday that we had the idea to launch Purple Hats, and I'm thrilled to have so many of you joining us today. This year, in addition to the top flight lineup of speakers, we've also held our first call for papers. We've received dozens and dozens of submissions from all over the world from some great minds. We have exceptional speakers lined up for you, drawn from across industry and government, building on the lessons that we've learned, creating the practice of threat-informed defense and Purple Team operations. There are thousands of you tuning in this year, and it's a testament to the adoption of MITRE ATT&CK and threat-informed defense that this conference generates so much attention from across the industry. Today, I want to open the conference by focusing us all on one phrase: operational excellence. What do I mean by that phrase? I mean more than budgetary efficiency, which is the least exciting business phrase one could utter in the first minute of a talk. I mean more than achieving staff efficiency and effectiveness. I mean more than organizational efficiency or individual efficiency. I mean operational excellence against the adversary. I mean achieving such a state of operational excellence that you know that you're ready for the next attack. The problem is the frequency and sophistication of cyber attacks is going up, and the combination of that frequency of attacks and the consistent failure of our cyber defenses puts organizations in an untenable situation. We all face unacceptable business risk in cybersecurity, from ransomware attacks on civic institutions to financially motivated theft to the disruption of national security. What do I mean by that? Last year, our research found that endpoint detection and response capabilities stop the top adversary techniques only 39% of the time. I'm talking about some of the most advanced cyber defense technologies available in the market, built by leading companies. These defenses work well in the lab environment, stopping real-world adversary techniques that have significant operational impacts, including those from Russian operations in Ukraine. But the moment customers try to employ these defenses within their own environments, they fail too often against the adversary due to misconfiguration. The customer in some cases doesn't even turn them on, or teams have transitioned out and not kept the specific control working as it should. Would you expect an untested, unexercised World Cup team to be able to defeat Lionel Messi? Absolutely not. Cybersecurity teams, just like World Cup teams, need to train to achieve their defense objectives. The solution is what we mean by operational excellence, a new focus in cybersecurity testing, exercising, and training to achieve real security outcomes. There are three elements of cybersecurity excellence. The first is better management. We need to get everyone on the same page about what's most important, focusing on the MITRE ATT&CK framework of known adversary behaviors. Two, we need real clarity for measuring performance. Leaders and teams need clear data about how well their teams are performing against the adversary. And 3, we need a clear plan for improving the organization's position and making the required changes happen. You need to know what's working and what's not so that you can begin to investigate the reasons for operational failure. Why did one detection fail? What happened to this particular preventative technology? Let's focus this narrative a bit further. What does operational excellence mean for the folks in this audience? For chief information security officers and security leaders, it means delivering real business value across the organization by saving time and resources for the company. Last year, the analyst firm IDC found that automated security control validation saves organizations millions of dollars in staff efficiencies. How? Teams can tune and hone their security technology effectiveness against real-world attacks. We may live in an environment of security control failure today, but with continuous testing, IDC reports that teams can ensure that the millions of dollars you're spending on personnel and technologies are bearing results at peak performance. 2, for leaders in the Security Operations Center and for security analysts, it means a few things. 1, it means driving down burnout on the team. Your team isn't just chasing alerts, your team is focused on defending the data and systems that matter the most against the threats that matter the most by doing a very specific thing, measuring performance. Did the right detection or prevention technology deliver as it should or not against top-tier Russian techniques? That kind of clarity erases ambiguity, which both decreases burnout and leads to real security outcomes for the team. For people outside the security team, for example, on the audit team, or for insurers or for regulators, you can now ask for real data about security program performance. That makes it easier to make decisions because you're assessing the real world. You're not tasking out subjective reports. You're not waiting to sift through questionnaires. You can look at real data and make decisions. One of our customers this year found they could peg their insurance premium at a set rate by using our daily performance data to assure the insurer of their security program performance. That was great news for them. At the center of our operational excellence is performance, and performance comes through training. That's what we do, leveraging the MITRE ATT&CK framework and our constantly updated scenario library of adversary behavior. This is created by the AttackIQ adversary research team. As a company, we produce timely analysis for our customers and for the public about emerging threats, and we deliver assessments and attack graphs so teams can test their security programs to measure performance. MITRE ATT&CK and our platform combined enable purple team operations, combining both red and blue teams in a constant process of focusing on the adversary and ensuring that our cyber defenses perform as they should. That's why we're here. That's also why we call this event Purple Hats and why we've selected the tracks that we have for the conference: a focus on MITRE ATT&CK, threat-informed defense, and achieving operational excellence. I'm excited to hear what people say. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this year's conference. Happy learning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Purple Hats keynote session, Evolution of Cybersecurity. My name is Carl Wright. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at AttackIQ. It's my pleasure to introduce a longtime friend and business associate, Greg Lavender, who is currently the Senior Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, and General Manager of the Software and Advanced Technology Group at Intel. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Carl. Good to be here and good to see you again.
Well, I'm super excited for this session today, and I'm sure our listeners are as well. You know, Greg, you've held a number of distinguished CTO roles in your past. How prevalent a topic has cybersecurity been operating at the CTO level?
Well, at Intel, maybe oddly enough, actually all of IT, including the CISO, reports directly to me. I'd been in the company about 6 months, and Pat Gelsinger calls me up on Christmas Eve about 10:30 at night and says he's going to move IT from out from under the CFO and have it report to me as the CTO because he wants to run it like an engineering team. And so that's what we do at Intel. We run IT as an engineering organization solving problems, obviously using lots of vendors to help us solve those problems. But I think it's a good thing having IT reporting and the CISO reporting directly to me because that gets us aligned and focused in solving our own business problems, but also protecting our IP and all of our users, from all the cyber attacks.
Well, and you've been on both sides of the fence. You've been on the vendor side as well as an operator on the commercial side. I believe it was Citigroup back in the day. How prevalent was cybersecurity as you worked on various transformational things for Citigroup?
Well, of course, I mean, obviously for financial services, risk management, cybersecurity is number one on the risk management list, besides employee insider theft and other nefarious things. But I think the that experience over 6 years, commuting from Silicon Valley to New York, working in a large multinational bank, really taught me that, how important risk management is. It's not just about throwing yet another security product at building the moat deeper or the wall higher. It's a multi-layer defense, technologies landscape you have to deal with, and the threats are always morphing. So you always have to be morphing with it. I actually own cybersecurity engineering as part of my role as a CTO, and the the CISO set the policy, and his policy and his expectations were always outstripped my budgetary capabilities to do things. So we had to be really smart about what we actually did and how we prioritize. And obviously, a lot of the technology has continued to mature and change over time. So I think the one thing you have to do is you can never be static, right? In whatever environment you're in, is because the threats are dynamic and ever evolving. And so, I'm always nervous when I go to the compliance subcommittee of the board, which I had to do at Citi as well as here at Intel. And they want an absolute guarantee that we won't be hacked, and I can't give it. I could just say we're as good as we were yesterday, and we didn't get hacked. And so tomorrow's a new day.
Well, that's I may use that one later if you don't mind. So for our listeners, CTO, Chief Technology Officer, I've often referred to it as the Chief Transformation Officer. And we've seen the world move from centralized computing to decentralized computing, back to centralized computing, and innovations over these major shifts have been truly significant. And it's been difficult for cybersecurity to keep up with these innovations. You've been more or less at the center of all these major transformations. Can you give us your perspective on this from a cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, I started my career. I've been a long time sort of networking software, hardware person. And anybody that as you mature in your career over the years, you can become a systems architect, right? Is you don't. I used to build servers and routers and switches and things like that. My different roles at Sun Microsystems and Cisco, and the network is both the great enabler of what we have in the world today, but it's also the pathway for the threats to follow. So network security is just been an ongoing thing. My whole career, I've been immersed in security from the first time, even when you were dialing up, to a bulletin board with your computer and a modem. So I think the threat landscape, takes advantage of the networks. The network security is obviously your first line of defense, but it's insufficient, right? You have to have more semantic knowledge about what's happening across your environment. And there are great technologies that are out there in the market now. Many of them cloud based, and workloads are now at the edge. They're at the cloud. They're in your private environment and colo facilities and things like that. So all of these environments in which those workloads are running and that data is being held and protected, have to have a multi-layer defense model, as we all know. And but I also think of it too. There's sort of three legs of the stool, which is you protect the data at rest, you protect the data in flight. But now we have a new capability, certainly with Intel confidence computing and confidence computing that is being offered by other vendors, is to enable protection of data in use, which is protect against those side channel attacks, which of course obviously hit Intel back in 2018 timeframe. I think with the Spectre meltdown before my time at Intel. So I'm really pushing hard at Intel on confidence computing using our trusted execution environments. We just launched Sapphire Rapids, which has the trusted domain extensions capabilities called TDX to enhance the software guard extensions we already have in our current processors, SGX. And really, it's picking up momentum and steam now. I talked to a lot of CISOs, talked to a lot of people, application owners. They want to protect data in use, not just data at rest and data in flight. So it's the third leg of the stool, if you want to call it that. And we work closely with all the cloud vendors, the CSPs in particular, Azure Cloud and IBM Cloud, to advance confidence computing because of the kind of critical regulated workloads that they're running.
Well, I want to double click on something you said earlier. And obviously, we have our audience at Purple Hats is pretty broad, from CISOs to analysts to vendors to marketeers, all kinds of folks enjoy this conference. And you spent some time at VMware, and certainly at Citigroup, you operationalized a lot of that technology. And under the kind of the guise of transformation, I want to talk about people for just a quick second. And it struck me a long time ago that security professionals don't use the word fluid or elastic, or a lot of the modern terms that you see CIOs and CTOs use as they take advantage of new architectural approaches that allow the business to react faster, fail faster, a lot of different things. What do you think the disconnect has been as organizations adopt these new emergent technologies, cloud being one of them, and security professionals' ability to actually secure these new terrains?
Well, I think I was an early experimenter with AWS back when I was at Citigroup, and again in a regulated industry with a pretty high bar for risk profiles. We did our own vulnerability threat assessment testing. We brought in external VTA vendors to help us out on that. And I think what I find still sort of shocking sometimes in the industry is people just assume that you can trust it. And I always start off with the assumption that you can't trust it, and then you got to reach a proof of trust, right, as a sort of a criteria for adoption of any new technologies. And so you can't just assume that the VM is trusted. We saw this with Log4j. I mean, Log4j was widely adopted, widely embedded. It was in VMware products. And so now you have essentially a provenance problem of software supply chain injection of malware, right, in an open source project that finds its way perniciously through lots of other technologies that pick it up. Same thing happened a few years ago with OpenSSL with Heartbleed, right? It's embedded in vendor appliances, it's embedded in applications, that are widely deployed. So I think the whole supply chain risk problem is a really important problem that we still haven't solved. And I think people just take it for granted that somebody's checking. And what I'd like to see, and I've talked to GitHub and others about this, is a real true open source repository where we know the provenance of every check-in, right? So that any open source technology or any open source, there's Black Duck and there's Sync and other things that can scan for these kinds of vulnerabilities. But if every company has to go create their own clean repository of all this stuff, it's not going to scale and be economical. We really need a way to figure out how to do this. We participate in the Open Software Security Foundation under the Linux Foundation, which is working on the SBOM, right, Secure Bill of Materials. At Intel, we also focus on what I call the H-bomb, which is not what you think. It's the hardware bomb and hardware bill of materials. I can actually give you the birth certificate for a wafer and all the chips that came off of that wafer and track that birth certificate as it goes up. And I call it from chip to motherboard. I can show you what the journey of that chip from the wafer to the motherboard. So I can give you some confidence with our trusted execution environments, at least for Intel hardware, and working through our supply chain vendors to give you that hardware birth certificate and give you that software birth certificate. You bring those two things together and you have some high confidence that no matter where you're running, okay, if you have those two pieces of information that are properly attested to with the trusted attestation service, right, then you know that you basically have a pretty high guarantee of it, but maybe it's not perfect because you still have to worry about the operational environment.
Right. And I think that's a perfect lead in for the next question I was thinking about for you, which is, you've been in the software industry for a very long time, as well as the hardware industry. Software has millions of lines of code that's plagued with errors. And, for decades, the Department of Defense and other entities have been working on, what I call assured computing, and, coming up with different techniques and capabilities around that, whether it was multi-level system operating systems or other things like that. It seemed that, like, in today's world of massive escalation of attacks, these assured computing constructs, confidential computing constructs, would be even more important for all end users of information technology. Why do you think it's taken till now for these to look like they're starting to become more mainstream, at least architecturally, being discussed much more prevalently?
Well, I think it's because of the heightened awareness now that we have in the industry, particularly for suppliers like us ourselves, right at the low end of the bottom of the supply pushing all this technology out into the market. And these trusted execution environments are being extended. NVIDIA is providing support in the GPUs. Obviously, AMD has SEV. We have our TDX, SGX technology. So I just think it's just taken a while for the business value proposition to justify the investments that need to be made, at least in our case, in the silicon level, plus all the software we have to have. And I think ultimately the cloud vendors moving in this direction because they have a portion of the customer base that's demanding it, and they will require it. And then there's a big move right now globally, not just in the DoD and the U.S. government, toward this idea of the sovereign cloud. And so these countries, their governments want to have their own IT services running in a cloud-like service, but they don't want it to be public and shared. So the sovereign cloud initiatives, both particularly in the EU more than the US right now, I think are going to drive that. And so, the vendors see the opportunity, right? We all want more security. We want less liability, less risk. And so you'll see, like you said, the regulated industry. So that's government and their contractors. And then you have the financials, and then you have the healthcare, and then telco, because telco is doing so much at the edge now. The edge is the new attack vector, because if you go, let's say you train you spend $1 million to do training of your model for whatever you're doing at the edge. You deploy it at the edge, and it's outside the normal security perimeters. It's run in Linux. So you're basically have to maintain patch levels. You want to trust the hardware, and this is where I think confidential computing is going to come, not from the core out, from the edge in, because of the need to basically secure both the model code. People are stealing the code that you spend $1 million to train, as well as all the parameter estimations that you've done to tune the model, and that's already being taken on. And also privacy at the edge. There's now with ADAS and sort of surveillance, all the car cameras, the scanning that's doing. As they're driving those experimental cars around, they're taking pictures of your face and your license plate. And, but you don't want that to be exposed. That's a violation of your privacy. So we have a technology we did at Intel Labs, which we've open source, called federated learning, which allows you to federate without sharing the data that you use to train. You can collect all the inference data and federate it into a smarter, more highly predictive, more true positive inferencing at the edge. So you protect both the model, but you also protect the privacy of the data that the model is using with regard to PII information, et cetera. So you're going to see new regulations certainly coming from the EU about this.
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think let's come back to confidential computing. And there's been a number of blockers for organizations to adopt this capability in the past. And it seems Intel and some others have been solving this with a number of new innovations that make this capability more approachable, maybe for organizations that couldn't do this for either a budgetary purpose or a lack of knowledge, skills, and abilities from their security professional perspective. Can you tell us about Intel's new confidential computing capabilities?
Yeah, sure, Carl. I'll try to keep it somewhat high level. So essentially, a trusted execution environment is a secure enclave, that's enforced at the hardware level, and it maintains encryption in memory of secrets, right? And so there's different ways to do this. Intel originally released Intel Software Guard extensions, which requires some little modifications at the application layer. And I like to think of it as essentially we give you this sort of virtual titanium straw that you can the application can insert. Think of you in the cloud and you have sort of platforms as a service, containers as a service, infrastructure as a service, and underneath that, the virtualization layer. Then there's the hardware. It sort of gives you a way to slice through all those different layers of abstraction and basically connect to this trusted execution environment and read and write secrets, keys, confidential data, PII information that's fully encrypted, only accessible to that application, even if it's running in an untrusted software environment or system environment. And with TDX, trusted domain extensions, we actually take that to the VM level. And so you can essentially say that I'm running a VM or I'm running a container, and that container is trusted. That container only has access to that encrypted memory, or the VM only has access to that encrypted memory. So it doesn't require the application to have that specific capability. It's more at a higher granularity. So you can trust the VM, you can trust the container. But there is now a trusted Kubernetes environment, a trusted container environments that's using confidential computing. And so I think the advantage here is that it's the granularity at which you want the domain of security and protection to exist, and do you trust the applications running in that virtual machine or running in that container to behave properly. But in the sense that it's hardware enforced. Now, in order to guarantee that, you need to have what's called an attestation service. That is, you have to have a separate independent. We have one we call it Project Amber. It'll GA in July of this year. That provides a trusted environment where it'll allow you to essentially deploy wherever you want to deploy in a confidential computing environment. So, with our technology, either SGX or TDX, at the edge, in the network, on-prem, in the public cloud, and we can essentially attest to the veracity of the CPU, the hardware, that sort of like bill of materials I was talking about, so that that you have a trusted environment that you're executing in. Even if the software that's there is untrusted or it's been compromised, we can essentially guarantee that there's no intercept or penetration of those secrets as they're held in that secure enclave in the hardware environment. So that gives a new level of what we call data in use. So you have data at rest that's encrypted. You have data in flight with TLS or SSL that's encrypted. Now you have in memory at runtime encrypted up to the point of execution. And so that just really closes the loop on limits the attack surface of how somebody can basically capture that data, and also it adds a lot of privacy value to your applications.
Well, this seems to solve a whole host of problems, and I want to jump back real quick, if we can, to trusted domain extensions. Obviously, the proliferation of containers has been massive over the last couple of years, and there's not a lot of security, notwithstanding some additional things that people have been buying and plugging into Kubernetes. The reality is they all run with the same namespace, right? You're increasing your attack surface area without something like this in your adoption of Kubernetes and other things like that, right?
Yeah, well, that's anytime a technology becomes ubiquitous, then everyone starts adopting it. Again, confidential computing just now sort of starting to be taken up into CNCF, right? And so we're seeing the first confidential compute enabled TDX. Kubernetes environment. So you can secure your containers. And again, that's just a powerful tool. And the whole point of this technology is to lower the barrier to adoption, right? Otherwise, applications don't adopt it. If you have to go change your application code, the time it would take to do that, could be from a few hours to a few days or weeks. So we want to make it really easy to consume it. SGX, we have a technology that's open source called Gramine, Gramine, Project Gramine, and it's now getting more widely adopted as a way for an application with a low-code interface to basically consume the SGX technology on a particular application level basis. And so containers can either do SGX or they can do TDX. Like I said, TDX. And TDX Connect is actually interesting too, because as I mentioned, other vendors like NVIDIA are providing confidential computing for their GPUs. So if you want to build cluster level connectivity across the PCIe bus, you get the security encryption across the PCIe bus to the NVIDIA card, so that data moving back and forth between the CPU and the GPU, let's say for training, is protected as well. So I think this at the hardware level will have the cluster level of confidential computing, not just the node level of confidential computing, and then you can build large domains of trusted execution across a data center in the cloud.
Well, I think, obviously architecturally, if this is broadly adopted, when this is broadly adopted, this can flip the asymmetry, that cyber defensive operators are seeing today, where, for every dollar a bad actor spends, we spend 100 to defend against it. It seems to me this just completely changes the equation for the adversary.
Yeah, so like I said, it becomes more about awareness. I was in New York City in January, spoke to about 50 CISOs, and I think maybe 6 of them had heard of confidential computing. So we did a later technical talk, that was well attended to some subset of those CISOs to kind of get everybody educated. So, and obviously been talking to lots of our customers, particularly in the regulated industries, as I mentioned, financial services in particular, and U.S. government. Working together with some of the key contractors that support software in the U.S. government. They're going to be the early adopters here because they need it, right? And so I think it's just going to take a little bit more time, but our goal is to try and close off as many of the threat vectors that we can. I should also mention at Intel, I have a security COE. It has the CISO sitting on it. I chair it. It has our product security and assurance team, that makes sure that all of our firmware, all of our BIOS, all of our chip hardware level capabilities. Their job is to do our own ethical hacking and try and penetrate and find out issues in our products We pay bounties for third parties to go find issues in our products. Every quarter, we issue what we call the Intel Patch Update across our product portfolio that fixes known security vulnerabilities that either, and we find about 85% of our own, and about 15% come from researchers, ethical hackers, and that are after the bounties. But we incentivize people to go find issues so we can fix them across our whole product portfolio, including our client technologies, just to give customers more assurance that we're on top of it, and that we'll never have another Spectre meltdown event. And so I'm pretty proud of the work that we're doing at Intel to secure that. But it's got to extend beyond what Intel does. We need to make this an industry-wide initiative.
No, that makes sense. And I do want to one last question on Project Amber, because I'm absolutely fascinated by this capability. So Project Amber, Trust as a Service, will Intel be extending this to different applications to take advantage of, or how do you see this working within the ecosystem?
So think of Project Amber as essentially a SaaS service that maintains the it has an attestation service that can essentially be tuned by an application, by a virtual machine, in partnership with a CSP, to essentially allow the application itself, or the VM, or the container, to essentially attest before it starts running that the environment that it's running in is sort of passes all the check boxes of what the policy that you set for what you're checking for. For example, you could say, I want to make sure before I spin up that container that the node I'm running on in the cloud vendor has got the latest BIOS patches or the latest firmware patches from Intel, right, for vulnerabilities that we've published or CVEs that were announced. And if it's not, then I don't want to run on that node. And so therefore the attestation will decline, right, that proof of trust. And and then you direct you to then you got to go find another instance that would have those patch levels. So it's one way for you is the application owner, the customer, the DevOps person, to ensure that that the compute platforms you're consuming at scale, abstracted by let's say a container as a service environment, is actually up to date and current with latest patches and latest service upgrades, and that it's an authentic Intel processor. It's not some you know hacked Intel processor from somebody else. It's got some supply chain issues. Now,
Yeah.
ultimately, I'd like to extend this where I mentioned before about the sort of the HBOM, the hardware bill of materials. I'd like to be able to get to a point where we can give you a full life cycle attestation about the sequence of steps that took to deliver that hardware to you, so that you both, and ideally have the SBOM as well. So the ideal state as we move forward and mature this technology is to give you not just an attestation of what's actually there running with the right firmware and the right CPU ID, but what actually was the history of that CPU, and what actually is the history of all the software that you're running, at least that's open source, that we can attest to because it's passed some SBOM criteria. I think ultimately that's what the government would like, is that full sort of trusted supply chain view, not just the instance view of what you're running at the moment.
Right. Well, that's just amazing. So, Greg, I've got one last question I have to ask you. What keeps you up at night?
Well, first I should say I don't actually sleep very much. I usually get about 5 hours of sleep per night, so I'm usually up, and awake most of the day. And but I'd say, look, it's the same thing that every other security professional or anybody operating some infrastructure keeps them up at night. Is that okay? What did we not think about? What did we not catch? Right? What are the morphing attack vectors? And have we done enough? And frankly, malicious insider threats, I think, are on the rise. And of course, obviously, phishing threats, are sort of easy and have high payoff. And so, obviously, just the risk management of that, ransomware, all these things, that affect real operations, real businesses, IP theft, et cetera. And of course, Intel is a target of, nation-sponsored, attacks for, IP theft. So, these are the kind of things that keeps my CISO up, myself up, and Pat Gelsinger, my CEO, asking me lots of hard questions all the time. But I just feel like we've improved as an industry, but I find still a lot of people that think of security as a second or third order problem, and I still think the software supply chain is at risk, and we have to be ever vigilant. And I spend a lot of money on scanning technologies in our GitHub repositories. We have a lot of security controls over our GitHub repositories. We know every check-in by somebody's employee ID and who did it, right, in our own technology area. So we're always being ever vigilant to make sure that we're delivering high quality security products to our customers, because we're so widely deployed and ubiquitous in the world that we cannot afford to have a systemic problem. And so I mentioned our product in the security and assurance team. So it's a 360 view of what's happening, and ever vigilant. If I could ask you the same question, what keeps you up at night?
Well, that's a great question. You and I both come from the IT side of the house first, and then made our way into our careers on the cyber-centric side of the house. For me personally, as when I used to run large networks in DoD, it was always about managing and measuring and an SLA, right? We wanted to keep our networks up 99.999% of the time. I've struggled for the last 4 or 5 years in cyber because there doesn't seem to be an SLA. And so I think for me personally, what we tend to see when AttackIQ goes in and we help different organizations is that at any given moment, 25 to 35% of people's controls that they bought are degraded or not working at all, and they've invested obviously corporate or government treasure into having those things to defend the enterprise. So I think for me personally, what keeps me up at night is the fact that people are not managing and measuring the effectiveness of what they're doing on a daily basis. And I think, it served us well on the IT side. And I think that will serve us well on the cybersecurity side as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Really, it's been great having this chat with you. I really appreciate you inviting me to participate in Purple Hats.
Well, Greg, we are so pleased that you agreed to join us, and thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks for the opening insights, Brett, and all of you on the panel. I think we are ready for a drum roll to announce the AttackIQ Purple Hats Customer Awards.
Yup, and the best part, no one's getting slapped during this award show. We're purely showing love to all of the Customer Awards winners for 2023, and here they are.
And the Thought Leadership Award goes to SA Power Networks Lindbergh Caldera, Cybersecurity Operations Manager. The Team Transformer Award goes to Andrew Malone at JetBlue. And our Community Partner Award goes to Ryan Williams.
Congratulations to all the winners, and thank you to the winners and our nominees for making the cyber world a safer place.
I don't know about you, but all this customer award celebration calls for some snacks. I'm hungry. We are headed into a short break sponsored by our friends at SP6. Let us know what you're munching on in the chat, and we will see you back here in 10 minutes. So go get your snack, break out, and we'll be back here soon.